Well, thank you everyone for coming, and also we have guests here, which is really wonderful, so a warm welcome. Really excited to have you here. And I'd like to start the class by asking you, where is this? Those of you who know it, don't say it, so where is this, you think? What's your guess? What side? It could be. I'm sure somebody's trying something like that. This is Bhutan, the Kingdom of Bhutan. And this is 10,000 feet up. It's called Tiger's Nest. It's a World Heritage Site. It's a very special place. You can't take photos inside, but I tell you that inside are about 6 or 7 big shrine rooms with golden statues and really quite spectacular. It's a very special sacred site. It was built in the 1600s. The reason I put this photo up there is actually it's Tom's fault, because when we were finalizing the dates for this class, I was in Bhutan. I was right there. And he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in Bhutan." He says, "I don't even know where that is." So 2 minutes later, he sends me a pin, with a Google pin. He says, "That's where you are." You know, he was Googling Bhutan. The reason he put it on the flyer, and I said, "Oh, that's funny that you're putting that on." But then when I thought about it, it's like it's a perfect beginning for this class. Because what they're doing very well in Bhutan, and this is not to romanticize, hey, welcome. This is not to romanticize other cultures, because every culture has their own challenges. But what they have figured out very, very well is contentment. They measure the gross national happiness of the people. They're also a carbon negative country, and their forest, 70% is completely intact, so you can't deforest. So they have a very healthy physical ecosystem, but then as a culture, they put a lot of resource and energy into the practice of contentment. So when you're there, you actually do feel that this is a very different society. Even the dogs are content. I am not kidding you. They have stray dogs, and when you walk around and you touch a dog, if you've ever been to Asia, this is not maybe a good idea sometimes, but in Bhutan, they come up and they're totally chill, and they roll over and they pet me, and it's very interesting. So when I was there, I felt like it was infused with equanimity and contentment. What's the difference between happiness and contentment? We all want to be happy. We all strive towards happiness. We get all kinds of stuff to make us happy, right? And then what happens when you get that new iPhone or that new car? What happens? Fleeting, exactly. It's very short-lived, right? So happiness is short-lived, and contentment is really an emotion that stays. So there are ups and downs in life. There's all kinds of traumas and dramas, but contentment is an emotion that actually stays. So there's something about this culture that a lot of actually scientists have gone over and studied this. There's a whole center for the science of contentment that went to Bhutan and studied what are they doing right over there to understand what is this feeling of contentment that we can cultivate no matter what, because life is full of adversity and challenges, and yet we can practice and locate ourselves in contentment. So just something for you to think about as we're now venturing into mental health and talking about stress and trauma, that really the antidote is right here. I don't even have to say more in a way, is really how do we practice contentment? How do we cultivate it in our lives? Because this is really the help for trauma. So what I'm going to do here in our class, this is a mental health awareness class, giving you some information about trauma. So we're going to talk about trauma-informed knowledge, to what does it actually mean to become trauma-informed for your mental health. And then we're also I'm going to ask you to have a growth mindset. So the growth mindset, opposed to a fixed mindset, is really where you are being open to new ideas and looking at challenges from a positive perspective, from a growth perspective. And this comes out of the research from Carol Dweck down the road here at Stanford, who did the original research initially with middle schoolers, where she looked at a group of kids that were told, you know, Joe had some adversity at school and was failing at school, and then little Joey was told, you know, you're great, you got this, you're amazing, you are fantastic, right? And then there was this other group of kids that were told, well, you had some failures, and what did you learn from that, and how did you get there, and what can you do better next time, and great effort. You did wonderful with your effort, and let's see if you can apply what you learned to the next project. Well, as I tracked those children, guess who did better in high school and college? The second group, right? that learned how to be on a path of dealing with adversity. So what we call grit, right? So they developed emotional resilience. They learned from their failures, and they had a growth mindset. They opened up to the challenges that they were encountering as a learning opportunity. So why I'm bringing that up is that we can look at our own trauma experiences from this growth mindset. Trauma is a fact of life. We all, at some point in our lives, will encounter trauma, and the kind of work that you're doing, you're constantly in touch with trauma. This is part of your work. So, but we can have a growth mindset to how we're even looking at these challenges, how we're looking at the adversity of our own, how we're looking at the trauma and tragedies of that we're encountering in the job that we're all doing here. And I'm putting myself in your category because as first responders, medical doctors, nurses, psychotherapists, social workers, we're all either on the physical front line like you are or on the emotional front line. And we're all kind of coming up against stress and trauma on a daily basis, and then also burnout that comes with these kind of jobs. So taking care of our mental health is actually not even a luxury, it's a must. Yeah, that's how I do a lot of training for psychotherapists also, and psychotherapists go into their job as well. It's like, oh yeah, I can do this, but they all get burned out after a while because you're not taught how to take care of your own mental health often. I wasn't taught like that in graduate school, right? So growth mindset, how do we change habits? Is we have to have a growth mindset to our own experience, learn from the challenges, and then we can access what's called post-traumatic growth. There is actually growth that comes from having these traumatic experiences. So it's not a death sentence, yeah? So also today I'm going to introduce you to a couple of tools, mental health tools that are based from mindfulness and somatics. Somatics means the body, soma means the body. And there's been a lot of studies and practices out there now in the last 20 years recognizing that trauma is really an event of the body, the nervous system. We often think of trauma being over there, the car accident, the 9/11, the fire, you name it, and we think that's trauma. But trauma is actually how we as a human being respond from our nervous system to the event. You and I could be in the same event and we'll have completely different responses. If I go on a ride along, you know what to do, you're dealing with the situation, I be maybe the first time exposed to it, I might walk out of there with PTSD. And you go like, this was just a normal day, right? So how our nervous system responds to trauma is really the critical piece. And all that goes into why is somebody traumatized versus the other person is a really complex picture, actually. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you some tools to try out, and we're actually going to start with one called the baseline. So I'm going to invite you here in this class to try out a couple of practices and tools for you to apply in your job. So if you don't mind, let's practice this first one. It's called the baseline. Can you all hear me okay in the back? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, and take off your straps. If you're more comfortable without it, yeah. Kick off your shoes if you like, whatever you like. All right. So this is called taking the baseline. So what we're doing is a very simple mindfulness exercise where we're kind of tuning in what's going on. So I'll guide you through it. If you won't mind taking on an alert but relaxed body posture, so having the feet on the ground, and you want to be away from the chair, the back of the chair, unless you need that for your back pain or anything, but you want to feel your spine. So have an upright position where you're lining up the pelvis with the shoulder girdle with the back of your neck. So imagine that you are a king or a queen on a throne. I love it. Everybody's going, yeah, good. So imagine yourself being in a very regal, upright posture, but it's relaxed, so you're not stiff about it. You can either cast your eyes down or close them, whatever is comfortable. And then begin to attune with your intention to really notice where your attention is going. So notice what's present right now. You're not changing anything. You simply are beginning to tune in to what is happening inside. You might notice discomfort in the body. You might notice temperature. You might notice thoughts, feelings, anything. And allow yourself to slow down by noticing the rhythm of your breath. And begin to take this baseline. How am I doing? You're inquiring with a very kind voice internally, how am I doing? So if I would ask myself right now, I would say, hey Manuela, how are you doing? So I'm bringing a very gentle and kind voice as I'm inquiring of what my baseline is. So just do that. Ask yourself, how am I doing? And then see what arises. Maybe your body is talking, maybe your belly, the rhythm of your breath. Maybe you're noticing that your mind is kind of wandering off, or sleepiness. Or you're totally sharp and awake, present. Whatever it is, just allow yourself to notice. You're not pushing it away. You're being simply curious. How am I doing? And then notice what's in the foreground of your awareness and in the background of your awareness. So the foreground could be something that preoccupies you today, and in the background it could be something more systemic, a problem or an issue in your life that you're kind of gnashing on. So just notice what preoccupies your momentary awareness of today or the last few days. And then what's kind of in the background that you're kind of working on. Taking a couple more breaths. Really being present to what this experience is right now. And then taking one more breath. And then transition back out. And notice as you're opening your eyes, just having done this little bit of practice, what you're aware of right now. Just shout it out into the room. What are you aware of? Anything. Aches and pains. Yeah, so you become more aware of your body. What's hurting? Yeah, very common. What else? Exhaustion. Yeah, tired, right? When you're kind of taking the base and go, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Yeah. Are you coming off a shift, or you're in the middle of no? Tired. Yeah. Yeah, you realize, my gosh, I've been really tired, or I am tired. Yeah, what else? Anybody feel a little calmer or a little bit more connected in, more attuned? Yeah. So what you just did is actually the beginning of taking care of your own mental health. It begins by checking in, by taking that baseline, like how am I doing? And what's important about that is to allow some spaciousness. This is a very basic mindfulness practice here that we just did. But it's also bringing to it a kind inner voice. How do we usually talk to ourselves? Not well, exactly, right? You go like, oh, you're such a, right? If you would say this out loud to your best friend, they would probably divorce you right there forever, right? So we have a very harsh inner kind of critic in talking to ourselves, right? Oh, you shouldn't be tired. Come on, push through this, right? We kind of are very hard driving inside. So it's important when we do a baseline that we're also saying, hey, how you doing? I've heard of a CEO, that is a really great story. He does his practice every morning. It's like a Saturday Night Live skit, actually. He stands in front of the mirror and he goes, hey, buddy, how you doing? And he does this. And his wife in the beginning was like, what are you doing? You know? But he actually started to do this as a practice to start talking to himself kindly, because he noticed how hard driving he was. And it actually had an impact on his culture, on his work culture. Because he was not just hard driving inside, he also started driving everybody else in his company, and everybody was burning out around him because he had such incredibly high expectations, and nobody can fulfill that day in, day out, right? So he started to, on the help of a therapist, I guess, actually Michelle Obama talks about him, So in a podcast. So he started to do this practice where he talked to himself every morning. It's like, hey buddy, how you doing? And welcoming himself. So this might look sound a little goofy to you, but pay attention to how you have that internal dialogue, because that feeds our internalized belief systems. I'm not good enough, I'm this or that, right? We have a whole list of how we're not measuring up. And it's a lot of this negative self-talk. So when you're taking a baseline, allow some space, tune in, have that kind voice. If you can't muster up your own kind voice, think of somebody who has a kind voice and use their voice for a while. Okay? So you just did a first step of mental health, taking a baseline. So when we talk about mental health well-being, it's like having these little balls of balance that we need to keep in check at all times in a way. So when we are talking about being well, we need to be emotionally, psychologically, behaviorally, physically well. We need to have all of that on board, right? We want to be well-rounded and well in all those domains. And then I want to really highlight the social one, because when we're not well, what's the first thing that we do when we don't feel good? By the way, shout out in this class. Yes, thank you. We isolate, we withdraw, right? No, I don't feel like it. And so we withdraw socially, right? And then what happens when we withdraw socially? We usually feel worse because nobody cares about me. Meanwhile, you have cut off from everything, right? So as human beings, we need other human beings to be well. We need to be seen, we need to be connected, we need to be in relationship. That is a lot of our mental health and emotional well-being. We need to be in relationship. But the first thing that we do is we withdraw from the connection that's actually vital to us. And in the beginning, it maybe is not such a big difference. But if we do this systemically and we isolate, it actually really erodes our mental health. So having strong social ties, strong relationships, tending to relationships, making an effort, being around other people, even if it's difficult, is very, very important for mental health. So that's a very important one. And then our stress capacity. When we're well, we have a lot of capacity for stress. We're actually designed, nervous system-wise, to deal with stress. There's such thing as positive stress, right? And then when we have all this in a good balance, then we make good decisions, right? Because we're calm, we're regulated. This is the word that we use in psychology. We said that we're emotionally, physically, nervous system, we're regulated. We're able to have a full capacity. And then we make good decisions. So when you're stressed, when you're under duress, do you make good decisions? Probably not, right? So it's and in your job in particular, it's very important to be making good choices and decisions. So when we experience mental health imbalance, these little balls start sliding down, right? And there's a tipping point. Now, what tips it for us is very individual. It's not, it's very subjective. So in the beginning, we're calm, regulated. We can take things in stride, and we can deal with the stresses at hand. We have normal sleep patterns, right? And we don't use anything to kind of cope. And we feel mentally and emotionally in control. As the stressor rises, as things are piling up, and again, it's very subjective, and often it can be that one call that tips you over, or it could be factors at home, or maybe at the station things don't go very well, or a combination of things. COVID tipped us all into some kind of madness, right? Do you remember when COVID hit? We all went a little loopy. The entire world went loopy, right? It was like we all didn't know how to cope with it. It was like too much. And we're still dealing with the fallout from that, right? Depression, anxiety rates are extremely high. Our young people are suffering. That's what we call collective trauma. There's a lot of collective trauma in our world right now. The war in Ukraine affects us over here, right? So our world is very interconnected. And as we're experiencing personal stressors at work, collective trauma, you're worried about the economy, you're worried about this and that, it literally piles up and we cannot metabolize it all. It's too much to process. And this is one of the definitions of trauma. Again, we're designed to actually deal with trauma. Our nervous system is equipped for it, but if it's too much, if I can't process it or metabolize it, then it puts me into coping mechanisms that are not healthy that are not very sufficient. So these little balls start to roll, and then I go into the next category, which is reactive, right? So I might get irritable, I might get impatient, right? A little snappy, and I get overwhelmed. So with the overwhelm, with the irritability, then sleeping patterns go out of whack. How many of you have trouble sleeping? Yes, thank you for all of you being honest. Yes, that's right. So difficult falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up, ruminations at night, right? And those are huge indicators that your mental health is beginning to erode, right? Sleep is a big indicator. Of course, your shift schedule doesn't help, right? Being the on-off schedule is very disruptive for the rhythm, the natural rhythm of your body. So as the sleep gets disrupted, then of course the body starts responding. Then what happens? I have muscle tension. The doctor says you're fine, but you have chronic headaches, you've got backache, your shoulders are hurting, this and that. The body begins to express the stress that's actually living literally in your tissues. This is a complete interconnection between our body and our mind. So as a somatic therapist that I am, we look a lot about what are these unexplained symptoms. People often come in and go, oh, I've got this, and the doctor says I'm totally fine. It's that the person has somatized their stress. It's actually, these are alarm bells of your nervous system saying, hey, I need some support and help, okay? And then all this is a little bit dysregulating, that's the word, it's dysregulating. So what do? I maybe take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beers to take the edge off, right? So then we use alcohol or other substances to take the edge off and self-medicate. In the beginning, that's maybe no big deal either. But as the stressors rise, we now go into the next category, right? So this all seems like I got it all under control. But then the stressor doesn't go away, or maybe piles up even more, or the work stress piles up, and maybe I have a toxic work environment, or things are happening on the team, or you name it, right? Then we go into the injured category. And now the irritability turns into anger, turns into anxiety, turns into depression. And now the performance begins to slide, right? So I don't feel like quite up to the job. I'm forgetful, I'm making mistakes, right? And then it starts going into the spiral of the sleep even getting more disturbed. And now you can start having flashbacks, nightmares, right? A call comes to haunt you. You don't know, why is this call sticking to me? I've been on calls like that 5,000 times, and this call keeps going around in my brain, right? Why is this one? So common to have flashbacks, and flashbacks, they come really in short bursts. They're kind of in images, little movie clips, like a replaying over and over again, or a feeling content associated with a memory. So they come to haunt you in repetitive ways, right? And yeah, please, yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's a classic flashback experience. So it's like the movie, yeah, exactly. And then of course when you have these kind of flashbacks, then you want to be withdrawing socially even more. Did you have that too, where you felt like you wanted to just kind of withdraw or kind of isolate, or?
Yeah, especially when I was heading into
yeah, as you were heading into it. Yeah, exactly. That's a really great point. Because what begins to happen is that your mental faculties begin to be impaired. It's the performance piece, right? It can't think straight. And you go on autopilot, right? You're kind of walking around like a zombie. You kind of know that you're there, but you're not really there. What I would call not really embodied in that moment, right? So it's like, yeah, and you're living beside yourself.
Mm-hmm. Trying to always get ahead of it.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, that's a great description. And of course, what happens with that is often increased alcohol use or substance use, right? Again, often shame starts happening. What's happening to me? I don't get it, right? And not knowing maybe that there is help out there, or not even recognizing that you're in trouble. And then you're trying to cope with substances. And then you go into the next category, which is unwell, right? And now we're going really in the trauma category here, big time, where the emotions get so dysregulated that they become behavioral issues, outbursts, anger, which is very common, especially for men. Sorry guys, but it's very common to go what we call the fight response, and anger is often a fight response. And so somebody might even say, gosh, you're not yourself, but hey, I need to write you up because you're so angry. But it's actually not really understanding that this person is in deep, deep suffering, right? The angry outburst is actually their last resort. They're like, I don't know how to be here. I don't know how to be in this. And everything is too much. It's like a scratchy cat, But then what we're seeing is, oh, your behavior is bad, right? You need to get this under control, which compounds it even more for the person who's suffering. This is a really toxic cycle for that person. So the angry outburst, aggression is a real warning symptom that the person is heading into this unwell category. And then with that comes underneath, when they're by themselves, they're feeling incredibly anxious and depressed. So they're kind of yo-yoing up and down, feeling even more isolated and stigmatized. And then often that can lead to suicidal thoughts, right? Because you feel very disconnected, you have now isolated, now people at work tell you you're too angry, you're too this, you're too that, and now you feel like you're kind of boxed in, right? So what happens is can't really perform your duties, more fatigue, emotional fatigue, physical fatigue, more social withdrawal, and then this is when alcohol use really goes into full-on addiction. Right? I know this is depressing, but this is part of the awareness, because this is recognizing, wow, maybe I'm going down this route. This is all stuff that you can get help with. Okay. The reason why we're talking about this and bringing this up is so that you can go like, well, maybe I go there, or I know somebody else. Maybe I'm not there right now in my career now, but even knowing about this and knowing that this can happen, maybe also opens your eyes that somebody else needs help. So if somebody is very angry and has those outbursts, and that's usually not how they are, you know them to be different, maybe you can think, oh wow, they're hurting, right? And maybe they need help. Maybe I need to reach out. And of course, what do you do with somebody who's angry and you say, hey, do you need help? What do they do? Right? But that you asked and that you cared, that you saw it, does get registered. Somebody out there is caring, right? And you try again, and they snap at you again. I don't need you. I don't need your help. Leave me alone, right? But then when they're coming to that moment, when it gets really dark, and they go, well, actually, Tom asked me how I was doing a month ago, and I'm going to make that call and reach out for help. So even making those efforts, even if your efforts get rebuked, keep trying. Don't give up on that person, okay? And don't let yourself be pushed away by the intensity of some emotions that come. Because the more intense the emotions is, the more hurt is really behind it. As I said earlier, trauma lives in the body and not in the event. And that's really important to recognize. We think of the event as trauma, but it's how it's actually lodged and processed in our body, and in particular into our nervous system. So this is a line from Peter Levine, who I trained with, and who is one of the experts in this country on trauma, and really understanding too that trauma is not just about talking through stuff, but actually recognizing what's happening in my experience, what's happening in my body, how am I actually doing? Yeah, that's the recognition there. Yeah. Bessel van der Kolk is probably the #1 trauma expert that we have here in this country. He's a real treasure and has done a lot of research on trauma, has an institute in Boston. And he was more of a traditional therapist. And then he met Peter Levine, who told him that trauma is in the body, and had a completely conversion of understanding his own work. And this is now a lot of therapists around the globe really are beginning to understand how it really is a physiological event in the body, which makes a big difference about treatment. So this is why it's important when you go see a therapist that they're trauma informed. Because somebody who's not doesn't have a trauma lens, doesn't really understand what you're going through. Right? And they might go, oh, let's just talking about it is enough, but it isn't. You need to actually have techniques to work with your breath, your body, your somatic experience, all of it, to actually work through the trauma. So I really highly recommend for you to get educated if you're interested in that. Of course, improving mental health is about learning how to have emotional and physical resilience, really working also, understanding your emotions and using your emotions as intelligent. Your emotions are intelligent. Even your angry outburst is actually an intelligent response to what's happening inside. If I'm hurting that much that I need to push everybody away, makes a lot of sense, right? It's an intelligent expression. Now, it's not very good impact, it's not very healing, but if you can recognize, wow, I am so dysregulated, I'm screaming at everybody, that gives you a way back. So working with our emotions, really accepting, like I'm really sad, I'm grieving, I'm hurting, I'm all of these things. When you begin to acknowledge that, that's the beginning of using your emotions intelligently. We all have them. We are equipped with incredible emotions, right? And we also have the capacity to heal. We have it, you have it inside of you. The therapist is just helping you to pull it out of you, right? To give you tips and tools and sit with you, but really you have it all inside. Again, I want to emphasize strong relationships with your family, your friends, community, and with that also spiritual resilience. There's been a lot of research out there, but it's very important that that you practice some kind of spiritual something. It doesn't matter if you go to organized religion, if you go to a church or a mosque, or what, you meditate in a Buddhist center, or if you don't want to do anything with organized religion and you want to walk in the redwoods or be on your surfboard, it doesn't matter. It's about having some connection to something larger outside of yourself. Something that gives you a reprieve and makes you come into perspective, oh, there's more to life. I'm part of life. That's really important. For some people, it's building benches in the redwood forest. For some people, it's being in the Santa Cruz surf. It really doesn't matter, but that experience of like, oh, I'm connected into something larger. For a lot of people, it's nature, right? Or some activity like that. But connecting you back in, because trauma, by default, disconnects you. It disconnects you from the resources inside, from your own spiritual beliefs often. It disconnects you from people that you love. It is a big disconnector for a while. But really underneath, you want to connect back in. So when you go back to nature or be a part of a community or a spiritual community, that all helps you to put you back into relationship, into connection. Okay? Because trauma is there is a tension between our survival responses that we must attend to when we feel under threat, but also we're wired for connection. Right? And we're constantly in a little bit of a battle. When we're truly under threat, we're going to sever connection in order to survive. But the healing comes through connection. And that leads to post-traumatic growth. As I said earlier, the post-traumatic growth is a whole field actually, where we can learn that trauma is something that we can grow through and with and become more resilient, and we begin to discover all these resources and capabilities that we didn't even know before, right? And you've done that, right? You've just shared that your journey was, 7 years, you said?
7
and
years. Yeah.
and that's really powerful. Yeah, that you can say that. This is a little bit of a depressing slide, sorry, but you probably know that these are 3 leading causes for firefighters is heart attack, occupational cancer, and suicide. Now, heart attacks is not about the donuts that you eat, but it's actually the stress on you and the job, right? So that is very stress related. And suicide in 2017, really the numbers kind of were alarming. And there was an awareness in 2017 that was at that time the leading cause of deaths in firefighters. And the number has stayed the same even though the general population has gone down. So this is alarming, right? We still have a lot of heart attacks and still have a lot of suicides. And they haven't gone down really. So that tells you that on the job, this is a highly stressful job, a lot of trauma there, and something needs to change of how that's being worked with. Some risk factors in general for mental health decline for firefighters is having PTSD, having maybe previous episodes of PTSD or undiagnosed ones too. A lot of people are undiagnosed. And then CPTSD. And CPTSD is complex traumatization as a post-traumatic stress disorder. And it refers to adverse childhood experiences or early experiences. So there's been a lot of data that when people have had traumatic childhoods, adverse experiences early on in childhood, and we're talking systemically. It could be domestic violence, it could be emotional neglect, it could be physical abuse, it could be difficult family situations in a systemic way, especially under age 3. If there's been complex traumatization when there's been a disruption of the family, of security, where the person didn't feel like they belonged in the family, weren't loved enough, didn't get enough resources, or some traumatic loss happened early in life, and that wasn't processed, and there wasn't enough support, that can become a predictor for later on having mental health challenges. And that was done in a very famous study called, the psychologists in here will know, the ACE study that was done in Kaiser, where they measured 17,000 people having adverse childhood experiences, and then later they followed them throughout their life, and they noticed that they had inflammation issues, a lot of physical health issues, and then mental health issues, and that was a big predictor, was the level of trauma they had basically early on in childhood. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So losing what we call an attachment figure, an important family figure early in life, also is a predictor for later on mental health issues. So if you have early childhood family trauma, it's a good time to work on it. Right? That's part of taking care of your mental health, of working through some of the stuff. Right? It's like maintenance, getting that dusted up. Compassion fatigue, yeah, that's very, very normal for first responders. This is also very common for doctors, nurses, social workers, psychotherapists. We're all on the either frontline, physical frontline, or emotional frontline. I've had, I think, 4 now, 4 burnout cycles and compassion fatigue on my job because I work with a lot of trauma. And it's very normal to experience it, but it's also an indicator, whoa, I need some help, I need some support, I need to work on that. So compassion fatigue, basically getting burned out and not feeling empathy or compassion for another human being. And that's very common to maybe feel that. What's the difference between empathy and compassion? Anybody? Empathy is when you feel somebody else's feelings, yeah? It's kind of what makes us connect. Compassion is empathy plus. So it's basically you're feeling, you're having the feeling that somebody's feeling, you're feeling what their experience is, but you're also taking the extra step of actually helping them, doing something. And it can be literally by actively listening, offering some support, just reaching out, right? That extra step, that's what compassion is. Okay? And you're all very compassionate people, very capable people, that's why you're in this job. And so when you're noticing that your compassion meter goes down and things are a little bit numb or frozen, or you feel a little blasé about the patients that you're working with, check in on that. That's another indicator, yeah? And then obviously acute stress disorder. Acute stress disorder is when you've been exposed to trauma and you have traumatic symptoms. They last for about 2-3 weeks. And similar to PTSD, but they're just short. So it can be flashbacks, nightmares, feeling emotionally dysregulated, but for about 2-3 weeks. And if you have enough rest and support, 2-3 weeks later, usually those go away. But if you have acute stress disorder again and again and again, it can also be then a determiner later on for PTSD. Gaslighting and toxic work environments, kind of hand in hand here, having difficult toxic relationships where you feel constantly activated again, where you can't, where there's maybe difficulties at work, maybe there's a rift between the work line and the leadership. Often that's very common. I've done some work in Redwood City leadership where they recognized, wait a minute, there's some difficulty between the actual executive leadership team here and then the people on the line, and that was a big part of the stressor and the culture where people felt not safe, basically. We all need to feel safe, no matter where we're working, what we do. If we're working in corporate, if we're working at the fire station, if we're working in a therapy team, whatever we're working, we need to feel that we belong and that we feel safe. And when that's compromised and when there's a division, that really is part of the toxic work environment. So one way to work with that, what I did with Redwood City, was working actually with the leadership. So the leadership did some work around working with each other so that they understood what is happening in the whole company. I do a lot of that work with corporate. I work with executive teams and then look at some of the dynamics that happening with each other, because that gets filtered down through the whole organization. Yeah. Okay. So what I'd like to do is show you a short video, and just 4 minutes.
You never think that any day you're going to lose anybody, so it's just kind of, hey, this side or the other, I'll see you in a little bit. I'm Brennan McDonough. I am a former Ground Mountain hotshot. I worked for the City of Prescott Fire Department for 2.5 years. I started my career in 2011, and it tragically ended in June 30th, 2013, when I lost 19 of my brothers. As a crew, we were called to the Yarnell Hill Fire, and our job as a crew was to establish an anchor point at the heel of the fire. And they decided to, post up a lookout for the crew. And so that's when they asked me to be the lookout. Later in that afternoon, we had heard about a wind shift. And when it started going east is about the time that I decided it was a good time to get out of there, and so did my captain. When I started hearing them in calling for airdrops, that's when I knew stuff was getting serious. The fire was, pushing forward really fast.
Breaking in, I'm coming 16. Right around hostile, clear in front of the front in front. Bravo 3-3, operation, you copying that on air ground?
The moment that it changed for me is when I heard them say they're going to deploy their shelters. In my 2.5 years, I've never had to do that.
Okay, I'm here with Grand Mountain Hot Shots. Their escape route has been cut off. We are preparing a deployment site. We are burning out around ourselves in the brush.
Everything just froze. We just lost 19 men. I just lost my support, you know? I lost my career. I lost my brothers. I lost what kept me on the straight and narrow. And even though I had an outpouring of support, I never felt so alone in my life. I felt guilty that I'm the one that survived. Why am I the person that gets to go home to my daughter? It fucked me up. You know, it really, I don't know how else to put it. There's not a day that didn't go by that I didn't relive what happened. You know, I couldn't get away from it in my sleep, and I couldn't get away from it in my community. To me, those memorial shirts and stickers and plaques were just another reminder that they were dead and what I had seen that day. Unhealthy habits, you know, started to fill my life. I just drank and drank and drank and drank and drank. You know, me being depressed was just my new normal. Me having anxiety, panic attacks, me suffering from nightmares and lack of sleep was just my new normal that I had to live with. I couldn't continue to every day of my life feel the guilt and shame that I felt for surviving and let it hurt my daughter. And I remember dropping her off, and I felt like she just couldn't wait to see her mom because of the lack of me being a dad. And I started driving home about 30 minutes into my drive, and I grabbed my gun and I put it to my head. And the radio, a song came on. And earlier that day, me and my daughter were dancing in the living room. That was my 15 minutes of energy to be able to spin her around and watch her laugh and giggle, and that's the image God showed me. So I unloaded the gun and threw it in the back seat front. I can't even remember where I put it. And I drove home, but I still didn't know who to reach out to. I know I needed help. I knew a little bit about what PTSD was and kind of what it was about, and to me, I guess I just wasn't willing to admit that I had it, you know? One of the reasons why it's so tough to reach out is because of this stigma of being a fireman, a firefighter, that, you know, we can do anything, we can get through anything. I think there is a mentality, you know, the suck it up mentality, and sometimes it takes a long time. It takes years for people to realize the effect. Right now in life, I'm just in a place where I have a lot of room to grow. You know, my life's been changed, and it's been changed for the better with counseling, how it's made this tragedy something I can live with. What I've learned through my journey is that, you know, first and foremost, the PTSD is real, and that it compounds, and then it really takes hold of your life, and it not only affects me as a person, but my family and the people that are around me. And so you're not alone. This is something that many of us go through, and we can't even begin to comprehend it until we take the step to get the help we need. And it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you fail. It makes you stronger as a person to better understand who you are, so you can be a better service to your community.
So how was that landing? Thoughts, comments? I think that cup, or backpack as we like to refer to as well, like filling, you know, all these experiences, putting it in a backpack, and at some point there's this one moment that kind of tips it over, right? And what can we do to take it a little bit out of our backpack? So I'd like to invite us into an exercise with each other. You game? You look so enthusiastic. So I'm going to describe it to you. And those of you who are not firefighters, I'd like you to be in groups together, right? So I'd really like just the firefighters to be in groups. And I'd like you to mix up. So meet people that you don't know. Redwood City meets Menlo Park. And who do we have? Woodside here too? Yep, great. So let's mix up, find 2 other people, become 3, and make a little circle, okay? And I'd like you to be not having any tables between you. So use the sides everywhere here. So meet each other, and all of you who are not firefighters, I'd like you to be in groups as well. What we're going to do is I'm going to have you touch into a baseline. I'm going to talk you into your baseline again. And then I'm going to have you remember a tough call. And it maybe is the call where you felt like, wow, I really need some help, or this one really stayed with me. And it's not so much about what happened on the call, but what happened to you. What happened to you? How did that impact you? Okay, what happened to you emotionally? How did you bring it home, or what did you do with it? Like, what happened to you? Your body, your mind, your heart, okay? I'm going to have you remember that in a moment. And then I'm going to have you each share, and I'm going to time you. And each person shares for about 7 minutes, and then one person speaks, and the other 2 people are being active listeners. Okay, so you're not giving advice, you're not going to say, oh yeah, me too. You're not going to do anything. You're going to practice active listening. Give each other the gift of true attention, compassionate attention. It's very rare that we kind of get to do that, okay? And then we're going to go, each person goes around, does the same thing. I will stop you in the 7 minutes. I'll stop you for a few seconds, and I'm going to ask you again to come to baseline and then finish your sharing. Okay, so I'll guide you through it. You don't have to remember anything that I just said. I will guide you. So start with, go around and just go who's 1, 2, 3. Make decision. Right. So everybody, let's come into the baseline. Take a moment, close your eyes, and feel your body. Start with the baseline. Where am I right now? Checking in. And notice even if you're holding anywhere in your body, if you're tense, take a breath, ease up a little bit. If you're having a little clench in the belly, just take a breath, exhale. And then recognize also that you're in a safe space. These are colleagues and friends. And we're here to give each other some support and compassionate listening. So taking a baseline. And then I'd like you to remember, each of you, a moment when you had that tough call, when that call that really stayed with you. Maybe it tipped you over into recognizing that you needed some support around your mental health. Maybe it was a wake-up call for you where you went like, wow, wait a minute, I need to do something different. What was it about this call, and what happened to you? What happened to you physically, emotionally? What was that experience like for you? That maybe you put a little bit in your backpack. What did you do with it? And then as you're even remembering right now, feel your body right now. Is there any kind of tension? Sometimes we clench even deeply in the belly or around the chest or the jaw. Notice how your body responds even thinking about it. And to other groups, the guest group, you can think about a moment that was where your mental health was impacted. What happened to you there? And then holding that memory, just kind of file that and then come back to your group. And then number 1, you're going to be the first speaker. And I'd like you to just share whatever feels right to you to share, and be as authentic and real as you like to be. The more you are, the more fruitful this will be. The 2 listeners, or 3 listeners, I'd like you to really locate in a place right now where you can truly listen with an open heart. It could be just an openness, a growth mindset, a presence. You give your colleague, your friend here, your undivided attention and care for these few minutes. So go ahead, number 1, and share your story. Okay, and then finish that up. And again, speaker, just notice what it's like right now. And become aware that you just took a little bit out of your backpack. And now your story is held in that group. Your story is now part of this collective story. Just become aware of that. What's that like to just even have that awareness that by you sharing, you took a little rock out of your backpack? Listeners, I'd like you to give a confirmation to your speaker, a nonverbal one, like you got them, like I received it. Just look at them, give them a nonverbal. You can give a hug, a handshake, or verbal, just on eye, yeah, whatever you like. Yeah, fist bump, all of it is good. Yeah, yeah. And speaker, just notice that being confirmed like that, just notice what that does to you. What's that like? Maybe that tension that you had earlier is a little unclenched. Just check that out. Do you feel more connected? Feel a tiny bit safer? Just notice that. Okay, and you now know how we're doing this. So go ahead, we're going to go second round. And before speaker 2 speaks, this is a rowdy group here. So what I'd like you to become aware again, when you're switching in, those who spoke, you now need to switch into listening mode. So take a moment and center yourself into presence and open-heartedness, giving some care and attention. Just center yourself there, listeners. Make some room to hear your partner's story. And number 2, whenever you're ready, kind of remember the story, your call, and share whenever you're ready. Go ahead. Okay, and finishing this round, again, take a moment of mindfulness. Speaker, just notice having just shared a little bit out of your backpack. What is it like right now? Do you feel a little bit safer, a little bit more connected? What's that like for you? Listeners, I'd like you to notice how that touched you. Where did that story land? And then give your speaker a nonverbal communication that you got them, that you received them. Could be the fist bump, a hug, a nod. Make that eye contact. Yeah. Yeah, thank them for their contribution. And then just become aware again, just sink into this awareness that, by sharing these stories, we're kind of holding them together, we're holding them collectively. You're not holding, your story is now part of this fabric of all of us, just because you shared it. So you don't have to hold it all by yourself. Okay, and now let's go to round 3. Go ahead, you know the drill now. Those who've been speaking just now, locate yourself again into the listening posture. Come into your heart, maybe breathe for a moment into your heart center or feel your body. Listeners, just locate yourself in that open attention, that's just caring. You don't have to fix it for the speaker, you're just simply given the gift of attention and care. Speaker, whenever you're ready, share the story. Listeners, notice what resonated with you. Notice your level of connection to your speaker. And then give your speaker a nonverbal communication that you got them. Or could be that fist bump or whatever you like. Yeah, just rest for a moment in this. What is actually happening here between the 3 of you, or the 5 of you? What's happening here? What's the level of connection? Do you feel a little bit more connected, a little bit safer? What's happening here? And then let's open it up. What was it like for you all to share? What did you discover? A little bit vulnerable, and that courage also to be vulnerable, right? It takes a little bit of a threshold there. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. But that's exactly it, right? And it's a kind of isolation to do it by yourself, right? And you don't have to do that, because it's actually not good for you, right? Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. Other reflections or insights? Yeah, exactly. You're not alone. Yeah, huge piece. That isolation, right? Oh, it's only happening to me. I'm the one, right? That's often that internal belief again that I'm broken, I'm this, I'm that. We kind of think that I'm all by myself with it. And that's not true. Not true at all. Right? Okay, shall we take a little break? Water in, water out? Okay, let's take a 12-minute. So this is called the back body practice, and there are 3 parts to it. We're going to work with the front of the body, and then the center, and then the back of the body. The reason that the back body practice is very helpful, it's a way to call yourself back into your nervous system, back into yourself. So you can do this literally anywhere when you're kind of coming back from a call. You can do it, at the station, at home. But having these, what we call somatic practices, to kind of come back to taking a baseline and checking in with yourself and shifting your nervous system state is really part of working with moments of stress and releasing them, okay? So that things don't build up. So let's play with this back body practice. So we're going to have, again, the posture that we had earlier. Having an alert but relaxed posture. If you're comfortable not having the support of the chair, that'd be better, so you can really feel your spine. Having the feet on the ground, the hands are just resting on your lap. And then check your posture, the shoulders being in alignment with the hips, the back of the neck with your shoulders. So you got that regal king or queen posture. I love how you're all doing it. As soon as I say king or queen, you're all going, it's beautiful. Yeah, so really inhabit that posture. Let the belly be very relaxed, okay? Nobody's watching you, okay? So just let that poof out. Either cast your eyes down or close them, whatever is more comfortable for you. And we're beginning with the awareness of the front of our body. So we're starting with the face and start with the eyes. See if you can relax the corners of your eyes. We do a lot of tensing around our gaze. And imagine that those eyes are swimming in a pool of water. The eye socket is like a pool of water. And then releasing your face, the muscles around your mouth. And let the ears kind of slide down. There's a lot of muscles around the ears. We often perk up with our ears when we're getting activated. So release your ears. Think of them sliding down on the side of your head. So softening the face, around the nostrils, corners of your mouth. Let the jaw unhinge ever so slightly. You can even open your lips just a little bit. And then coming down your throat, the front of your chest, really beginning to ease, soften the throat. You might want to swallow. And then traveling down the front of your chest, towards the upper diaphragm, sternum, and the solar plexus. And easing any kind of tension you might notice in the chest area. And you do that by paying attention to that part of the body, sending a gentle breath to ease up anything that you're holding. Coming down the belly, around the navel, towards your lower belly, the whole pelvic bowl. Releasing any tension in the lower belly. We hold a lot in our gut, so ease up. Take a few deep breaths into the belly. So as you're easing the whole front of your body, it's slowing down, asking the body to participate, to becoming present. Easing also the front of your arms, the tops of your legs, all the way to your hands and feet. And then I'd like you to become aware that there is a center axis in your body running from the top of your crown, your head, all the way to your pelvic floor. There is an empty, open space called the central channel. It's in front of the inner spine. So think of it as a tube or channel that runs like an axis from the crown to the perineum, an open space in the center of your body. So just feel into it, kind of visualize it. It's an energetic channel. It's an ancient channel, actually, that's been practiced in pretty much any martial arts. So feeling this channel, I'd like you to now drop your in and exhale into that channel. So as you're breathing in, you're breathing from your perineum, your pelvic floor, breathing in, bringing that breath all the way through the body to the crown of your head. As you're exhaling, you're bringing that breath down all the way through the body into the pelvic floor. So take a few breaths and get used to this. So breathing in, you're breathing from the belly, the depth of the belly, the pelvis, all the way up like a wave, bringing it up through the body to the crown of your head. And then as you're exhaling, you're bringing that wave breath downwards again. So take a few breaths at your own rhythm. Breathing in, bringing the breath up. Breathing out, bringing the breath down. So the front of the body is soft. The breath is now traveling up and down this corridor of the central channel in the center of your body. Easy, long breaths, like slow rolling waves at the ocean shore. Letting those waves travel up and down this channel. And as you're listening to your own rhythm of your breath, feel into the wave-like quality and sound of your breath. As you're breathing in, you're really drawing the breath up through the centers of your body to the very top of your head. As you're breathing out, you're rolling down that breath all the way to the bottom of your pelvic floor. Easy waves of breath. So keeping the awareness of the soft front, open, receptive soft front, easy flowing breath in the central channel of your body. But now in a moment I'm going to engage with the back of the body. I'd like you to add into this a really tiny movement backwards, really a millimeter. Really gentle shift back as if you're engaging ever so slightly the entire back of your body. It's relaxed but alert. So feeling the back of your neck, your head, the tops of your shoulders, the muscles alongside the spine, those powerful muscles going all the way towards your glutes and your seat. So it's almost like you're leaning back as if you have yourself backed up. It's a tiny motion. You're leaning back, engaging the back body in a relaxed way. The breath is flowing and soft in the center, and the front of the body is open and curious. So just feel that sandwich, open, soft front, easy flowing central breath, engaged back body. With each cycle of your breath, you're dropping further into this soft front, easy center breath, engaged back. And if you're getting distracted or you're sleepy, just simply notice it and then come back. Soft front, you can even say it inside. Soft front, easy central breath, engaged back. So you're calling yourself back in to this presence of calm, engaged, and open. Couple more moments. And then in a moment, I'm going to ask you to gently open your eyes, but not fix on anything. Just let the eyes fall open. Don't grab anything. Just let there be a soft gaze. And notice as you're in this back body posture right now, what qualities of you are now present? How do you show up when you're in this awareness? What becomes available of you? Just feel into it. And you might want to now raise the gaze, and you can use me as a as a billboard here, but if you're in your back body right now and I'm coming at you with whatever this is, a situation, a person or spouse or whatever, how would you respond from your back body? I'm coming at you. How would you respond? No response? Okay. What's that? Calmly. Mm-hmm. Do you have bandwidth for my rah, whatever's coming at you?
Not as much as normal.
Mm-hmm. Not as much as normal? Uh-huh.
And I feel less stress.
Less stress, great. So you feel less stress, yeah, because you're in yourself, right? So whatever, I call it the theater of the moment. I'm the theater of the moment, right? And you're just like in yourself. You don't have to be in your front body to kind of pull out of yourself, right? Beautiful. What else? There was another comment here. How are you? Did you say something?
The second one was saying just relaxed.
Relaxed. Yeah, relaxed. And when you're in this relaxed space, again, how do you respond to this coming at you? Would you see my distress? Would you be able to see through it, perhaps? Or if I'm snapping at you or coming at you, do you have maybe a little bit more compassion for me? A little bit? Yeah? Can you all feel the state? So you just accessed an internal state, okay? Trauma is also a state. It's a dysregulated state. This is a regulated state. What you're just accessing, you might all feel a little sleepy, a little like, oof, coming down, right? But that's a regulated state that you're now accessing. This is available to you. We just did, 5 minutes of this. This is a practice that you can literally do anytime. I do this all the time. When I sit with clients, when I teach, I call myself into my back body all the time. Especially when I'm noticing I'm doing this energetically. How much during the day do you do this? Right? Especially in your job. So calling yourself back in. You can do it when you're driving back to the station, after your calls, when you're at the station. You can do it at home, anywhere. Nobody's seeing you. You're just looking calm and chill, right? And you're just like, you're practicing your Zen. Yeah. So this is how you take care of your nervous system. We often think that, when I'm stressed, I have to go somewhere to fix it. But in fact, if you're taking that baseline and you're noticing I'm a little snippy, I'm a little this, I'm a little that, okay, I can just practice the back body. I can just ease up the front. I can drop that breath into the center. I can engage my back body, right? And there I have myself again. So you can literally, I do this many times throughout the day. Right? This is how you take care of your nervous system. So it doesn't build up to this big crescendo and then you feel like you have to have all this renovation internally, externally. Okay? You all chill now. I like it. That's great. Very good. So this is just one tool. There are many tools, yeah. But I really encourage you to find some practices like this that you can use throughout the day, that you can also use on the job. When I started to teach, I've taught this now to thousands of people, I think, to business, firefighters, anybody, normal neurotics, anybody, and a lot of therapists too, because therapists do this all the time as well, right? So like calling it, we're not of help when we're not in our own selves, our own experience, right? Because then we have bandwidth, we have capacity. A couple more slides. So we already talked a little bit about it, but one of the internalized beliefs often with firefighters is that, or first responders, that they're prioritizing toughness and bravery and putting others before themselves, right? That's part of a common profile. And then often your own mental health struggles are often perceived as selfish or weak, or I'm not made for the job, or I failed. There's all that kind of negative self-talk or perception, right, that often comes with it. And then there's the fear, if I really speak about it, then I won't get the right help, or I will be seen as weak or not up to the job. So that often kind of compounds the stigma, right, and it kind of shuts down, and then people go into kind of what we call a shame spiral of feeling ashamed of struggling, and that becomes very isolating. Right, so I just want to kind of say that. And this comes a little bit with the territory. It also comes a little bit with being also heavy on the male gender, usually. That comes with it as well, but I think it's part of the culture that's been imprinted here as well. So become aware of when the tough part comes up, going like, oh, what's going on here? If I feel this way, what goes with it? And this is where body awareness and these mindfulness practices are helpful, because it's literally a posture when you get tough. Do you all know that feeling in the body when you kind of show up in a more tougher way? What do you do? Anybody? You know that about yourself. When I get more tough, I know I get a little tighter. I tense up a little bit more. I put my chin up, right? Close down. Yeah. So notice that about yourself. It's not that you shouldn't be doing that, but I just notice, and if that's how you go home, and then you meet your loved ones, does that go over very well? Not really, right? Yeah, so becoming aware of that. Okay, so when we're talking about stress and trauma, we often talk about the stress-trauma continuum. So there is such thing as positive stress, and we actually need stress to be motivated. There's nothing wrong with stress itself. So when you get married, when you have a child, when you have a job promotion, when really exciting things happen in your life, they can be stressful. Would you agree? Becoming a parent? Who's a parent in here? Yeah. Was that a stressful time and also a wonderful time? Absolutely. Do you wish this, you don't...
Does it stop?
No. What, the wonderful part?
No, the stress of being a parent. I don't think
Yeah, it's stressful to be a parent, right? And at the same time, you could not imagine your life being without these wonderful creatures in your life, right? So, but it's stressful. But if you had now 50 children, it will probably tip you over, right? Or if you go to 10 weddings, it'd be a little too much, right? So even positive stress can kind of accumulate. So we often think about these positive events as just great, but too much of positive stress can also tip you over. But the point being that positive stress is good. We need stress. It brings us motivation, brings us focus, right? It's all good. And our nervous system is fully equipped to handle it. When we go down the scala here, when we go down to acute stress is usually episodic stress. As I said earlier, it lasts 2 to 3 weeks. And with enough rest and support and adequate spaciousness and all of that, usually we kind of metabolize that stressor and we can go on our merry way. And then comes the tipping point. Again, very individual. What tips somebody into traumatic stress is very subjective. We often don't know, even as mental health professionals, we don't know what that one thing is. There is often a trigger, but the trigger is usually a cascade of many different events and experiences that have not been processed, not been realized, and it tips somebody over. And we had in another class, we had somebody, a firefighter, talk about that it was a very benign call that tipped him over. Yeah, it was a lady with a nosebleed, basically. It was like a nothing kind of call. And he found himself sobbing afterwards and realizing, gosh, I'm in trouble, right? And that was the tipping point. So it's not always the big dramatic call. It can be anything. And in this moment, it was a trigger about this elderly lady who had lost her husband and her dog and was feeling all alone. and he felt like he couldn't do anything about this kind of human suffering. And especially as first responders, it's the worst thing that you can't help, you can't do anything, right? It's often those kind of calls that get to you, right? Is that correct? Yeah. So that tipping point, what that is very individual. Or maybe there's a lot of stress at home, or some health issues going on, or the compounding of many, many layers, right? Or the pandemic, as I said earlier, tipped us all over into some crazy space. So that tipping point does arrive, though, for a lot of firefighters. And maybe you're sitting here and going like, well, that doesn't apply to me, I'm just new at this, or that won't happen to me. Everybody starts out thinking that. When I became a therapist and I was working with political torture, I was like, oh, I'm tough, I can take this, I'm good, I'm trained, I'm good. And then I found myself sobbing on the floor, feeling the despair of the world and feeling like I don't know what's up and down. So it happens pretty much to everybody who's helping human suffering, honestly, right? Anybody who's on the emotional and physical front line of human pain and suffering, it's natural that we would feel that, otherwise you'd be a walking zombie. But the mistake we often do is like that something is wrong with us, right? Something is wrong with you. It's not. You're a human being, you're responding appropriately to the stressor that's coming at you. What's wrong is that you're being told it's not okay to feel all these feelings, that you shouldn't feel this emotional dysregulation, but it is. And so those are the warning signs, right? As I was saying earlier, feeling the emotions, feeling the flashbacks, feeling the nightmares, feeling the dysregulated sleeping, the alcohol use, all those things. When you begin to realize, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble, get some help, right? So traumatic stress is really the other side of the continuum, where we're beginning to also use our coping mechanisms from our nervous system, which is fight, flight, freeze, and appease. We use those ways of being to then meet our ordinary life circumstances. So it might help when you're putting out a fire to be in your fighter mode. Great idea, because you need that mobilization of your nervous system to fight the fire. But if you're coming home and you're meeting an argument with your spouse in that same kind of energy, you're going to have a full-blown marital crisis, right? Have you noticed that? Yeah. So, and that often happens. And this is one of the hallmarks also of trauma, that we're kind of getting stuck with our nervous system responses, and we come home and we're having conversations that are coming from the fight, flight, freeze, and appease kind of menu, our primitive coping mechanisms, okay? So there's a little bit of neuroscience here, but when we have a stimuli coming at us, in this moment, this is the wolf, a big bad wolf is walking into this door. So where Gabe is, the door is closed and locked, there's no exit there, and this huge wolf, 500 pounds, they actually been raising it at the lab here. Huge wolf is coming through the door, so what are you going to do? It's coming in, it's really hungry, hasn't had, they've been not feeding them very well here at the lab. So the wolf's coming in, it's looking around, it's like, big fangs, it's coming at you. What are you going to do?
Arm yourself.
What's that?
Arm yourself.
You're going to do what?
Arm yourself.
How are you going to arm yourself?
Chair.
Chair. Okay, so you're going into fight mode. You worked out, you like ready for that beast. Okay, you are, okay. Look at him, he's like, oh, I got this, right? All right, so you're fighting while we're all doing what?
Don't worry, y'all, I got it. Running out the door while Hooper is fighting the wolf.
All right, you're running. Okay, so he's by himself. Okay, we're running. Okay, so you're running, you're fighting. What else? Oh, you're going to be the scientist. I love it. So you're observing his behavior or the okay. How he's going to do. Great. So you're going in observation mode. Okay. Any others? Nope. What's that?
I think we're all going to find out when the time comes.
Yes.
It's just a natural response. You're not thinking about it.
Exactly. The truth is, you don't know, actually. You don't know how you're going to respond. You're going to actually, in about 30 milliseconds, your body and nervous system is going to determine the biggest chance of survival. And guess what? If that monster really comes in, we're all going to go into the unsexy version, which is like, the frozen one, the possum. Usually that's what we take. You actually don't know how you're going to respond. If you're feeling like, this thing looks a little, no, we're sticking with you.
1,000 times. Like, that's what hypervigilance is, right? It's like prepping and preparing and planning. Like,
yes.
You don't know what goes on inside this head.
No, I do. You're right.
I'm ready.
You are. I'm sticking with you, for sure. Yeah, because I'm going into the possum mode. But the fact is that when it really is you and this wolf, you actually don't know. You might be fighting it, and probably you will, because when we're often confronted in those situations, we do take the fighting route, because we're not thinking, we're feeling and sensing that there might be a possibility. We do fight. We do flee, we try to get away, we do all those things, right? So the point being that there is a hierarchy. We have usually first an initial fighting response, maybe that beast is too big, oh shoot, I gotta run. Oh, it's faster than me, and then usually after that doesn't work, we go into the freezing response. Because evolutionary speaking, if I'm dead, right, if I'm looking very unappetizing, this wolf won't eat me, right? This is biologically, this is an instinct built in. So the wolf is gonna go, ugh, this is dead already, I'm not gonna eat it, right? Then the wolf leaves, because we all look really uncool, and then what happens? The danger is over, what happens to us? You've seen it in your patients. What happens? Shock. What comes after? A shake. We call it a discharge. Okay? A discharge of the nervous system, because the fighting response, the fleeing response, all that had to mobilize huge amounts of biochemistry in your body, and that had to be overridden in that moment to go into a freezing response, had to be overridden by a branch of your parasympathetic nervous system. It had to shut it down. Had to shut down your sympathetic charge. So after that is over, the danger, the sympathetic, all that activation in the body needs to now get released. And it shows up in shaking and crying and feeling weak in the knees. You've been there 1,000 times with all the patients that you take care of, right? This is actually how the nervous system resets itself. It's a healthy process. But guess what happens? You're now shaking and crying, and you really wanted to fight that thing. And you didn't, you froze, and we all saw it, okay? Yeah, and then you're actually having a response now, you're crying, and we're going, what's wrong with you? What's up with that? Such a failure, right? What are you gonna do? You're gonna shut down again, right? Right? Are you gonna help him?
I agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah. So what's happening is that you're going to go, oh boy, I'm a failure, I didn't, and then you're going to override some of this discharge of your nervous system, and there it goes again. So what happens is these traumatic activations literally get stored in the body. Guess what somatization of the body is? Neck, shoulders, guts, back, is all that, these freezing responses literally getting stuck, and then your body is like this. Okay? This is what we also call somatically lodged trauma. Okay? So when this natural discharge process is interrupted, it is not even being completed, that's when we see some of the symptomology. Yeah? We also see it by giving us that self-talk, right? You're such an idiot, why didn't I do that? Right? Because after the shock wears off, we have that thinking mind coming back in. Oh my God, that was a really bad big wolf. That was, oh my God, this was a 500-pounder, and how come that? Then we start thinking about it. In the moment of true danger, we don't think, we become instinctual creatures using this repertoire of the nervous system. But when the danger is over, we get those faculties back, and then we start analyzing, contextualizing, creating meaning. I should have worked out more. I know wolves. I grew up with wolves. Why didn't I? Right? I'm such a bad person. And so we're interrupting ourselves now. This is what we call this internalized self-negative talk. So we can do it to ourselves. Right? So this is also when trauma is lodged in the body, but we can give ourselves an infusion of this somatic experience by kind of activating this negative self-talk. Does this make sense to you all? So what happens is when a stimuli comes in, it actually activates the amygdala, which is the seat of our emotion. It's also the seat of our fear alarm system, which is very healthy. And it sends signals very quickly into the body and interrupts the thinking cortex, right? So where we're thinking, abstract, planning, identifying what kind of wolf it is, in the moment of true danger, we don't have time, evolutionary speaking. We belong eaten by the wolf. So what's really baked into our nervous system is that when we see a danger, we act. And we act in this kind of repertoire, right? We also act by appeasing, right? Hey, wolf, I'm actually not that dangerous, but you know what? You look really great. So this kind of appeasing behavior that we often do relationally is also a survival strategy. Happens a lot in relationships, right? So you probably have been around it or seen it. It's very, very common. So what happens when there's an activation in the limbic part of the brain, ancient part of our brain, these signals get sent into the body, we act, and then when we're allowed to have those responses and discharge, that's when we restore the health of our nervous system. So this goes a little bit into the polyvagal theory, which is a gentleman called Dr. Stephen Porges, who kind of revolutionized the field of trauma and our understanding of neuroscience and trauma. And he talks a lot about how the nervous system is our internal command center, and that we process 95% of information is processed unconsciously through our senses. He calls it neuroception. It's a term that he coined. And it's basically how we perceive. We're constantly perceiving if I'm safe, or if we can connect, or if I'm in danger. Like when I'm meeting you for the first time, I'm going like, are you a safe person? Yeah, you look pretty nice. Yeah, you're smiling at me. Ah, okay, right? Or if you're giving me, oh, I don't know, you're looking at me critical, I'm not sure if I'm safe, right? So then the alert system goes up. We constantly do this. It's hardwired from infancy. So what do you do when you go on a call? You do a 360, yes? Yeah? How do you do it? Good job, yeah, walking. And what do you use while you do it? What's that?
All your senses.
Exactly, all your senses, right? You're using your senses. You're feeling, you're seeing, you're hearing, you're smelling, right? You're kind of using your sense perceptions to understand what's going on the field. Well, you're doing this. You're doing neuroception, okay? You're doing neuroception, which is fantastic. We're really equipped this incredible intelligence of our body to do this. But if our neuroception is now stuck on with vigilance, right? Because this is the problem with neuroception. It turns into vigilance that can be really stuck the whole time. Because once you do the 360 and you got the information, did whatever you did, then you need to bring it back down. Yes? Because now if you're kind of staying on an alert and you walk around in life like that, who do you become? Pretty overbearing, probably, right? Because you maybe start going like anticipating the next danger. We had in one class, I don't know if you were in that one, but a gentleman was talking about how he goes camping. Do you remember that story? With his family, and he was anticipating every danger that could happen on the campground. Like he's just going camping with the family, but he was thinking about that tree and this branch on the water and this and that, and he was literally, we call it catastrophizing, thinking about all the different ways how the dangers could be there, which is very, very common. So this catastrophizing, anticipating, which is part of your job, which you need on the job, is really not helpful in your private life. Have you noticed? I'm sure your kids and your spouses do not appreciate that, right? So we call it the stuck-on response. So when we're in this vigilance, and this vigilance, this neuroception, is not calmed down again, it's not brought back into safety, right? Then we're kind of staying in this vigilant mode all the time, and it comes across as controlling, perhaps even bullying, lurking over people, like controlling the family, like catastrophizing, can't sleep, anticipating all these dangers, seeing danger where there is none. Very, very common, okay? So the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. It's a very powerful nerve system. It's our information superhighway. And the vagus nerve is, these fibers communicate from the body to the brain. So 80% of that is what we call the bottom-up process, right? So that 360 awareness is a bottom-up sensory process, and that's only 20% going the other way. So if we think about it, we're much more body awareness than we're brain awareness. We give our brain a lot of credit, but it's actually our body that deserves the credit of intelligence. So, here it is. So again, here the autonomic nervous system. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic has two branches, which I'll tell about in a minute. But the sympathetic, the excitatory part of our nervous system, is the fight and flight. So when we're mobilizing, when we're getting into our action system, fighting that wolf, we're using either our fighting response or our fleeing response, and our heart rate goes up, we're breathing very fast, right? We're moving, our muscles are acting very fast, and we're attacking or we're defending. And then when that's overridden because we're not successful, perhaps, then we're using the parasympathetic branch of our nervous system. So what happens is sympathetic activates, I can't fight, I can't flee. Now the freezing part, the dorsal vagal, comes in and shuts down those responses, and I can survive very good. And then when the danger's over, I release that, and that's also good. We have another branch of the parasympathetic, which you just felt, which is what we call the rest and digest system. It's called the ventral vagal. When you were doing the sharing with each other, when you're breathing intentionally, when you're feeling your body, when you're sensing into your emotions, when you're feeling connection with nature, with other human beings, with spirit, whatever it is, then you're feeling that sense of connectivity. That's your parasympathetic ventral vagal talking. So that's your healer, basically, of your own nervous system. This is why it's so important to come into those moments of connectivity, spaciousness, mindfulness, body awareness, connecting with other humans. All of that is so important because it reminds your own nervous system to come back into this healing space. Yeah? Because trauma, often the person can't access this, and that's why they need help, have help. Yeah, all really what I'm doing, I call myself a psychobiological regulator. I'm just a very calm nervous system, right? So a stressed out client comes in, I'm in a calm nervous system, and they're going to borrow from me for a while, this nervous system, and then getting reminded, oh, you have that too. That's really what I'm doing all day long. Yeah. We need each other. We need this, what we call the social engagement. We need other human beings to get there. So this is I'm going to end with this slide and then we do another practice. But this is the window of tolerance. It's a concept, but it's a very helpful one. I just told you we have the sympathetic, which is at the top of the line, the sympathetic arousal, and we have the parasympathetic arousal. So sympathetic is active, fight or flight. Parasympathetic is the freeze, right, the numbing. And in here is the parasympathetic, the social engagement that's calm and connecting. So here I can deal with the stresses of life. In the window of tolerance, I can deal with whatever's coming my way. I can respond to it. I can then metabolize it and process it, right? I can learn from it. I'm open to my learning experiences. But when I have to meet a danger, I go into the sympathetic. I shoot outside the window of tolerance. And for a short time, that's great if I come back into the window of tolerance. But what happens is I go into sympathetic, and I overshoot the window of tolerance and go into parasympathetic, into the dorsal vagal, into the hypoarousal. So high activation, anger, rage perhaps even, and then I kind of flatline, go numb, zone out, space out, can't stay there, go back into the sympathetic zone, get really irritated, angry again, go back, and that's what we call a trauma roller coaster, up and down, the sympathetic and the hypo and hyperarousal. And overshooting this, here's where healing happens. Here's where process is happening. So the key really is to learning what is my window of tolerance, what triggers me, when, how, what happens to me, right? When we started the class, what's going on? What's happening? Wow, my heart rate is going. I'm really irritated. Well, I need to take a few breaths. I need to go for a walk. I need to call my friend. I need to work out. I need to whatever. Get myself back into the window of tolerance. You're back into that nice ventral vagal. You go like, wow, that wasn't so difficult. Why was I so worked up about this? You get perspective. You don't have perspective in the hypo or the hyperarousal. You are going into full throttle survival mechanism, coping mechanism responses. And somebody who suffers from traumatic stress or PTSD, they live in that zone. They bounce back and forth in that zone. And they don't even often know what the window of tolerance is. And the window of tolerance can expand, right? And we all have certain times of our lives when it gets smaller and bigger, but knowing what is my window, where is my threshold, right? What triggers me? That's often the journey of discovering like about our own trauma is like, what are some of my triggers? Yeah? You learn that over time. And when we're full in one of those attack modes, when we feel really swallowed by our emotions and intensity, it can feel like so absolute, and that's the reality of everything, right? But then when we kind of maybe get ourselves back in the window of tolerance, we go like, what was I doing? I was so intensely in that, right? We all had these experiences. Questions or thoughts? Okay. So then I'm going to invite you to lie down on the floor. So lie down, and if you have any back pain, our psoas muscle, it's a very big muscle in the body that runs from the back of our thoracic spine all the way to the inside of our inner leg, and it's our fleeing muscle. It's what we engage when we're running, but it's also what we engage when we're fleeing a danger. So often back pain comes from stuck body responses of the psoas muscle. One way to release the psoas muscle is to put the feet on the ground, have them wider than your hips, and let the knees fall towards each other. See if that feels good. So flat feet on the ground, wider than your hips, and then letting the knees fall to each other. If that feels good, great. If you don't like it, you can stretch out your legs. Just experiment for a moment. But it often releases the lower back, and the psoas muscle gives it a little break. Yeah. But you can also stretch out if that's better. So start by taking a baseline again. Notice that the earth is supporting you, that there's this beautiful earth that's welcoming you back. And take a moment to take a breath in and then do a sound like, inhale, exhale with a sound. Okay, that's super skimpy. I really want a sound. Inhale, okay, we're still in Victorian times here. Come on, inhale, exhale, complain for a moment. We're very shy with the sounds, but they're super important. One more time, big fat complaining. Inhale, exhale, there you go, much better, there you go. Yeah, and feel the laughter and the chuckle and the goofiness, all good, that's part of releasing. So feeling that, then put one hand on your chest and the other on your belly. The elbows are resting on the ground, so you're no stress, just rest them on, one on the chest and one on the belly. One hand on the chest, there you go. So the elbows are resting on the ground. And then I'm going to talk you through what we're going to do, and then I guide you again. So we're going to take a full breath cycle, breathing in and out into the chest, full cycle, and then we're going to do the same thing in the belly, and we're going to alternate belly breath to chest, chest to belly. Okay? So beginning with the chest, take a full inhale into your chest, really billowing it out, big fat inhale. At the top of the inhale, gently hold. And then as you exhale, feeling the weight of your hand riding down that breath all the way, emptying out. Then a full belly breath, now going to the belly, inhaling into the belly. Feel your hand rising on the belly. At the top of the inhale, gently pause. And then as you're exhaling, give a gentle pressure as you're exhaling, expiring that exhale completely, emptying out the belly. And then come back to the chest. So now that you know the rhythm, full in and exhale into the chest. And then full in and exhale into the belly. So go ahead and find your rhythm of breathing this way. I'll be quiet for a few moments. As you're breathing in, really feel the expansion of your chest, three-dimensional. A little pressure in the back perhaps as you're taking that full inhale. As you're exhaling, feel that softening of the breath. Each breath cycle slowing down even more. Really luxuriate, feel that breath, sense it, enjoy it. Each inhale is an opportunity to feel and sense yourself in a new way. It's always a new beginning. As you're inhaling into the belly, feel how wide and expansive the belly can become. Let go of any kind of tension in there. As you're exhaling, bringing that exhale to its completion. Perhaps at the bottom of the exhale, a little pause, feeling a complete stillness. Get curious about your breath. Breathing in, really feel how the breath goes all the way to the tips of your shoulders, how it widens your shoulder blades. And make sure that you're really alternating. Chest full in and exhale. As you complete that, full belly in and exhale. So really alternating. This is the important part of this breath practice. When you're exhaling, feeling how you're returning to the earth, to that support underneath you. There's always support. The earth welcomes you back any moment that you consciously tune into it. You are held and supported. Each breath cycle, make it softer and longer, taking your time. Notice how your body wants to actually breathe. If you're finding some tension or discomfort, see if you can soften towards that. Taking your time. Breathing in and breathing out. A couple more moments here, so make it count, really breathing into your chest, full inhale and exhale. And then the belly, full inhale. Really feel how wide and expansive that breath can become all the way to the pelvic floor, into your pelvic bowl. And then letting go of this focused breath, return to a natural breathing. And notice. Notice what's happening inside. What are you aware of? Perhaps right here you can send yourself a kind invitation to return to this kind of state of being. Maybe a little promise to your future self. Oh, I'm going to visit myself in this way of breathing, make space for it. Maybe before I go to sleep or start my day. Consciously regulating my breath. If that fits, if that feels right. Just notice the quality of resting that's coming in. Just truly resting. A little bit of spaciousness. Couple more moments, and then we're going to transition. Whenever you're ready, you can start wiggling your toes and stretching your arms. You can make some sounds, if you like, twisting your knees side to side like a windshield wiper, giving your body a stretch. What would feel good right now in your body? Yeah, go side to side. Give your back a massage. You all need to make more sounds. You're holding your sound body too much. Oi, oi, oi. And then gently let yourself, I'm going to have to put the lights back on, I'm sorry. Come on up, gently sit up. So the important part of this breath is the alternating. So what you were just doing, full inhale and exhale in the chest, full inhale, exhale in the belly, and that alternating establishes that rhythm of the sympathetic charge and the parasympathetic discharge. So I told you earlier, what's really important is to have the balance between our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. Trauma is the dysregulation of our nervous system between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And this is a tool in which you can basically teach yourself to come back into this regulating space. How do you all feel after this? More chill? Yeah? More spacious? You're happy? You have a big smile? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so it makes us more regulated, right? We're more available, we're more relational. So this is what we call the social engagement. You're more ready for relationship, right? Because we're feeling calm and regulated and chill. So this is a practice that you can do in the morning, in the evening. If you want to use it to go to sleep, totally fine. I think somebody did in here. Every class somebody does. So don't worry, it's good news. I consider this a badge of honor, okay, if you fall asleep. So you can use it at home that way. So when you go to bed, just teach yourself, because what you're teaching your nervous system is that let me take care of you, let me come back. You've been going into action mode all day long, you've been taking care of the public, you're doing all this stuff, and now it's time to call myself back in, right? And so this is a practice to do so, all right? So when I was, as a young clinician, when I was working at San Francisco General with the political torture survivors, the entire group fell asleep on me, and I thought I was the most miserable therapist failure ever, you know, until I realized they felt so safe that they could fall asleep. But I was like 25 years old or something, and I go like, oh my God, I failed at my job, right? But actually I realized later that this was good news, right? Because they could not sleep anywhere. So they called me the sleep doctor after that. Can we sleep today again? I'm like, oh great, this is what my career has come to, inducing people into sleep, you know. Yeah. So I want to teach you, talk about one more tool, and this is really just a tool, and I highly recommend that you employ that. There's a little protocol that I've written up, and Tom will share that with you, and it's called unlinking. Because your job is so much engaging with the public and with deep human suffering, you're in the job of human tragedy and suffering and trauma. In your role, you're linking for a short time with that story. You're a very important person in their story. They will forever tell the story of how you saved their child or their neighbor or whatever, right? And so you're linking in your role with that tragedy, with that trauma. But it's not yours. You're there for a role, you're there for a job, and then you need to unlink from that so you do not put it in your backpack. We always do when we're in close relationship with human suffering, through our compassion, our empathy, that's good, but we don't want to take it with us so it impacts our mental health. So this tool is very simple, and you can do it in many creative ways. You can do it faith-based, spiritually based if you like, but the basic steps are that when you're done with a call, that you actually make a very clear boundary, and you do it internally, so you don't speak it out loud. It's an internal practice. So you say something like, again, use your creativity, but you say something like, thank you for letting me help you in my role, but your death, your trauma, your tragedy is not mine. So you're unlinking from that. You've done your job, you're finished, and now you're unlinking, right? Again, you're not speaking it to the person. That'd be a little weird. Okay, you're going to get lots of complaints. but you're doing it inside, right? So it's an internal practice. And you're really consciously making this boundary. I'm now unlinking from this tragedy. Some people have found it's really great when you're taking off the gloves. You're going like, I am now unlinking. I'm slowing down, walking to my truck. I'm just taking one more look. I'm going like, your tragedy is not my tragedy. I am not taking this home with me. You know, thank you for letting me serve you. Sorry for your tragedy, right? Whatever, however you want to word it, but it's an acknowledgement of what has happened, the acknowledgement of your role, and that you're now setting a boundary and unlinking. And a moment of awe here. This is 10,000 feet up at this monastery. And why I'm bringing it up, coming full circle to the very first slide where we started in Bhutan, is that there's been a lot of studies done on the power of awe. It's been studied for the last 15 years. A gentleman named Dr. Keltner from UC Berkeley has studied it. And they're finding that when we have experiences of awe, it actually gives us a lot of immune health boosts, and it has a lot of mental health benefits, and it kind of puts us into a much bigger perspective. And awe is defined as an experience that's beyond ourselves, that puts us into awe and wonder, and we kind of, everything gets a little bit more rearranged into perspective, right? So our suffering, our pain, our dramas kind of get to, it's like, wait a minute, there's a much bigger world out there. Right? And my drama, my trauma, important, but it's not everything, right? And it helps us a lot to kind of shift our mindset. They've identified about 8 different categories, or what he calls 8 wonders of awe. What do you think is number 1? What's that? Babies is a good one, yeah. Babies are great. Babies are full of awe, wonder, and heartache. Yes, that's a good one, but it's not number 1, yeah, but it's good. What else? Nature is a good one, yeah. Also high, ranks very high for people, right? Nature, like a vista like that, the ocean, the Grand Canyon, whatever it is, right? Music, art, right? But what they found in their studies is actually that observing or being part of, seeing somebody's courage overcoming their obstacles, their hardship, their adversity. Isn't that something? So if you think about your own struggles and actually sharing vulnerably, like what you're going through, it actually inspires awe in another person. I've certainly been in awe with hanging out with these guys and hearing their stories of going through it and transforming some of these traumas into doing something meaningful with it. That's very awe-inspiring. That's one of the reasons I'm actually still in this job 30 years later as a therapist, because it also inspires me, right? The suffering of other humans. So if you think about it, when you're kind of going into a dark place and, oh, I'm so this or so that, if you think about that, your story, your struggle actually inspires hope and awe in other people. Isn't that a cool research finding, right? And you get inspired by others, right? When they're sharing their vulnerability, you go like, wow, that's really courageous. That's really cool, right? It helps you to come out of a dark corner too. Struggles, and why shouldn't we, right? It's not a stigma. It's just, it's part of human experience. And we have now the technology, the understanding, we have research, we know now how to help. We do know. We know what heals. We do know that. In fact, that's when I started out as a young clinician, my quest was, when I was working with the political torture survivors, like, what actually heals trauma? That's been my 30-year quest. I'm still on it. Like, what really heals, right? And I continue to learn about it. But what I have learned from the 30 years is that it's not holding it in, not being in the shadows with it, but actually really putting it out, working with it, and not to be afraid whatever this feeling, this darkness is, that it's actually workable. It is workable, okay? I have many success stories in my career. And it's a tragedy, right? When your friends think it's the only alternative that they have. It's really sad. So thank you for sharing that. So any thoughts or questions or comments or stories? What kind of, this is all I have for you today. I feel like we could be starting a whole training now, but any thoughts or comments? Thanks everyone. So that's all I got. Thank you.